Commission to order. Today's date is September 11th, 2017. This is a regular meeting. First item up, we're going to approve minutes from August 14th, 2017 meeting. Commissioners, any corrections or clarifications? Seeing none, a motion may be in order.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion by Alpa. All those in favor, or a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, they are approved. All right, we have several public hearings tonight. First up tonight is City of Hastings Ordinance Amendment number 2017-31, Downtown Restaurant, Tavern, and Bar Parking. Director Hinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning.
Mr. Hinton gets started, I recuse myself and go sit in the audience since I didn't make an investment in the hearing that's coming up here with
Fair enough.
sitting down there.
All right.
So as not to look out of place.
Commissioner Slayton recuses himself from the next few items up for discussion. All right, Director Hinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning Commissioners. What we have before us tonight is an ordinance amendment for your consideration. It pertains to downtown parking and loading requirements. There are two things that we're looking to do tonight. One of them is to create a new special use permit requirement that would exempt additional parking triggered by the conversion of existing building space into bars, restaurants, and taverns. I know that's kind of a mouthful here. But what we're looking at is, in the downtown right now, if you have an existing building and you want to convert that existing building into a bar, restaurant, or tavern, the parking requirements necessary to do that are much greater than what would be down there for a retail space or an office space. What the existing code requirement would provide or would make you do is to provide additional parking. Now, in a perfect scenario, that might work, but in our downtown area, physically, most buildings cannot do that. They're built very close to one another, they're built from lot line to lot line, and there's physically no ability to do that. We've recognized in the past that the downtown is a unique area from a parking standpoint. In 2003, we created an exemption from buildings for downtown parking themselves that would exempt out existing conditions of buildings and only have a requirement there for when you add to the intensity. And that's where this provision comes in, is because a bar, restaurant, or tavern would add to the intensity of parking, there'd be more parking demanded from it, they'd be required to provide it. And so what we did early on is we took a look at the existing situation of parking in the downtown area. You may recall that earlier this year we did a parking study that took a look at the parking situation all around the downtown area. The results of that study found that we have parking available, and the utilization of parking even during peak periods, there's still space available within it. So we feel comfortable bringing forward the special use permit requirement as an ordinance amendment. We also had this reviewed by the Planning Committee of City Council as well to ask them about direction as whether this would be something that we should generally move forward with, creating a special use permit for this exemption, and they were on board with that as well. So that's one aspect of what we're doing tonight, is we're adding via special use permit an exemption for conversion of existing buildings to bar, restaurants, and taverns. What that would mean is in the future, if an application for one of these conversions comes forward, we could issue a special use permit for that. You know, in the situation that's before us tonight with the Spiral Brewery, they upon approval of this, they would come back for a special use permit so they could have that exemption within that. So that is the first action of the ordinance amendment. The second one is something that we found through review of this code, and that's a clarification to the extents of the existing exemptions of downtown. Now, within your packet itself, I put in a map of the downtown area. You can see here in the purple area, our area is zoned downtown core. The red area is a zone C3. The yellow areas are residential. When we established this code, we established it right on the heels of doing the Heart of Hastings plan. And what we did is we created this exemption for areas that were zoned purple, DC, and this brown, which is residential, or here, residential mixed use on this property. Those were provided the exemption. What it did not do is areas that are shown in red here, which includes most of Second Street, Sibley Street, Vermillion Street, were not given that exemption. The reason behind that is it was our intent at that time to rezone all of this property to downtown core, and that way it would have complied with the code and with the exemption. However, that did not take place. So what it did unintentionally is create a lot of non-conforming situations down here. So what we're proposing tonight is to fix that, and so we have we're adding that areas that are zoned C3 that are within this area, this dashed area here, would be exempt from meeting future additional parking requirements from additional space added to the building. And so it would not affect the residential properties, would not affect the industrial properties, just those that are zoned commercial. So those are the two ordinance amendments that we have before you tonight. This is a public hearing. You can open it at this time, or I can stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. As we move forward with the public hearing and as this comes for discussion, we do note on the agenda we have Spiral Brewery, but I think we want to have the discussions be separate. I don't want this discussion to be solely laced around the application, the next item on the agenda. So at this point, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone wishes to step up and speak, they can do so now. Once, twice, sold. All right, we're going to close the public hearing for the amendment, the ordinance amendment. Commissioners, it is now before you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Deaver.
So I know that the Spiral Brewery is about 4,500 square feet, and I think that's probably the size of quite a few of the Second Street buildings. But I guess I'm curious about why we picked 10,000 square feet, and I'm interested in understanding what happens if it's 10,001.
Sure. Hey, Commissioner, on that, the 10,000 square feet would be the conversion space. So if you had, take a look at Hudson, for example. If Hudson had a 10,000 square foot area, that would work, even though it's a 100,000 square foot building. As far as the rhyme or reason for picking out 10,000, I wanted to put in there some sort of upper limit delimiter on that one. If you did something that would be much larger, then they would have greater parking implications, more seating within there, and that might not fit with being able to handle the capacity in the downtown area. So I guess there's nothing really magic about the 10,000 square foot number, but just more of the intent of putting in some upper limit delimiter on that.
And so if it is 10,001, then they have to meet the additional parking requirements?
If it was 10,001, I suppose they need to get a variance at that point because they would not be able to fall under the special use permit requirement.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Alpha.
John, I understand the need to do this. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. We're continually getting more and more of these types of facilities moving in there. But aren't we kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit with this too? I mean, eventually we're just going to be at a point where we cannot suffice the cars. And do we have any longer term idea or plan on how we might deal with that?
As far as the parking demand?
As far as the parking demand. I mean, you know, a Spiral Brewery comes in and the Fireside just opened up, and, you know, I mean, it's great to see these businesses come in. I love that. But my concern is are we going to create such a problem down there with parking that people are going to stop coming down there because it's too big of a pain?
Sure. Yeah, kind of a victim of its own success a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think through the special use permit process, one of the things that we considered was whether we just allow this by right and just create a blanket exemption, or whether we create a special use permit process in which we can review on a case-by-case basis. What I anticipate happening with this, with a future application from Spiral or any other applications that come forward in the future, is that we'll go back to the parking study itself, and we'll continually revise that. And we'll be able to make some rational judgment as to whether we've reached a point of saturation where we can't handle additional.
I know this is a little off, maybe a little off topic too, but with the Hudson, I know they're planning on building a parking ramp there. What are the chances that that may be large enough to handle some of this offload as we go forward as well?
Sure. Yeah, with the Hudson property itself, the grant that we received for it requires 100 of those parking spaces to be public. Now, a lot of the demand for that will be generated by Hudson itself, but it doesn't preclude other businesses or patrons from parking in there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Marks?
Director Hinsman, just piggyback on the discussion here, so is there any cap that's anticipated on the number of special use permits that can be issued for the downtown area?
It's a good question. I don't know if I foresee a potential cap. What I do hope to do is to keep reviewing the parking that we have generated down there in the future. I mean, the time frame that we had between the parking study that was done this spring and the last parking study was 15 years. That's way too long. We've set about some good parameters in which we will be able to update this thing much more periodically, so we could be in a situation where if these conversions come forward, we have some good data to back up decisions we make.
Second question, just related to the square footage calculation. Did you look at it being tied to occupancy versus square footage? I mean, I'm not sure how much is back of house versus the retail side, but I mean, are there situations where the brewery, you know, for off sale is so successful that they're going to have 12,000 square feet of, you know, production area, but only 30 or 40 seats, so it's not necessarily, you know, related to the 10,000 square foot mark?
That's a good point. No, I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I think there's some merit in that. Yeah, because our primary concern of that really is going to be the seating area, not necessarily
Right.
back of house activities that don't generate much parking demand.
Right.
I had a question about the zoning, and why did that zoning not change? Was it because we didn't have any applicants that would prompt that, or what happened?
That one, well, that's probably on me. I mean, what we
My
intended.
intent is not to call you
Oh,
on the mat.
no, that's fine. No, our intent was, as a city, just to proactively go out and rezone properties. That the difficulty that you have with that sometimes is rezoning can be, city-sponsored rezonings of properties can be contentious on that, and we just never did it. So it was something that we intended to do, we didn't do.
Do you foresee that ever happening now, at this point? Or we've kind of piecemealed ourselves into that position where, you know, it's kind of filling the same role that we're looking for. We've given it mechanisms like we're looking at today to function like the downtown core. So with that, you probably...
I'd always put it out as a possibility, that's for sure, but it's not on our short-term plans.
I like the idea of a continual assessment of the parking, especially once we get, you know, our art space that filled to occupancy. We get Hudson finished up and running. That we're continually looking at that. I've always been one to say we can't continually say we're like a Stillwater, we're like a Red Wing, we're like Hastings. But when you look at those communities and their parking, if you go to downtown Stillwater, you gotta hike if you're gonna park, and people still go there. So I'm not as concerned about saturation. I think there's creative ideas that will come down the road. And as Commissioner Deaver is a proponent of self-driving cars, I think this won't really be too much of an issue in the next 10 years. All right, that's my 2 cents. Yes. All right, any other questions or discussion on the ordinance amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Deaver.
I move that we adopt ordinance amendment 2017-31, downtown parking and loading requirements as presented by Director Hinsman.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second by Alpa. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion prevails. All right, John, can you run us through the next step on the path for this one?
Yeah, on this one, it's an ordinance amendment, so it'll go forward to city council at the September 18th meeting for first reading and to order a public hearing on the consent agenda. And then the public hearing and final action would be scheduled for October 2nd.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda. This again is a public hearing. This is Spiral Brewery, special use permit number 2017-33. Operation of a tap room at 111 East 2nd Street. Mr. Fortney.
Thank you, Chair Hutchinson. The applicants are proposing to develop the subject property into a brewery with tap room. The one-level building was built in approximately 1863 and is about 4,500 square feet in size. About half of the building will be used for retail sales and the other half for production and storage. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future land use map, and the use of a brewery with tap room is allowed by special use permit in the C3 district, provided there's a minimum floor area of 20% devoted to retail sales and a brewery production and distribution area up to 7,500 square feet. The purpose of reviewing a brewery with tap room as a special use permit is to assure that it's operated within the nature of the area, since it does include a manufacturing component. The city's liquor licensing ordinance and state regulations regulate the hours of operation, but generally a brewery with a tap room could operate similar to other on-off sale establishments. The applicants anticipate the tap room retail portion operating about noon to 10 p.m. Wednesday or Thursday through Sunday, and brewing would occur most likely Monday and or Tuesday mornings. This is a picture of the front of the building, obviously. And here's a picture of the rear. All deliveries would be occurring in the back of the building off the alley. They would plan on receiving them in the mornings with a frequency of about 2 to 3 times per month. Refuse will be directed to dumpsters in the alley, along with other buildings in the back alley. Most of the dumpsters are on the opposite side of the alley, up and down the alley. And spent grain will be stored in temporarily in large closed cans inside the building near the rear garage door for a maximum of 2 days. Required parking is based on the 2 uses within the building and would require 12 spaces beyond the grandfathered downtown use of retail. As it currently stands, they would have to accommodate those parking spaces off-street somewhere in the area. But as you just heard, there's an ordinance amendment coming forward that would allow for a special use permit to not have to put those parking spaces in. This is, I believe, in your packet also. It's kind of probably hard to read on the screen. But the proposal includes some general interior remodeling, brewery equipment, walk-in cooler, rooftop equipment for heating and cooling of the building, and refrigeration. Additional roofing support and taller overhead rear door. The HPC has met on this proposal and approved the building signage and rooftop equipment. And they'll also be looking at the back garage door next week. And this is a diagram of the rooftop plan showing the 3 pieces of equipment, main equipment on the roof. There'll be a chiller and a condenser and heating and cooling system. These are examples of those units. And notice was sent to property owners within 350 feet of the subject property and posted in the Gazette. And no comments have been received at this time. Staff recommends approval of the request as presented, subject to the conditions that are listed in the staff report. And there's a public hearing, and I can stand for questions before or after that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Forney. All right, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak can step up and speak, give your name, rank and serial number, and we'll go from there. We'll open the public hearing now. All right. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, commissioners, the applicants are present, so if the commissioners have any questions, we'll ask you to step up so the people playing along at home can hear you. Commissioners, what is your wish?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Barrs.
just one question here on the staff's recommendations. It says, number 1, prior to receiving the certificate of occupancy. Is that correct, or should it be lined up with building permit, or, I mean, is there a chance that they would actually start and go through construction, get the occupancy before they'd know if the zoning amendment was changed?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would be better to have it sooner in the process. I'm not sure if there was gonna be any issues with the ordinance. I didn't wanna tie it up, if they wanted to get their building permit, right away, but, you know, either way, they are aware of the situation.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, we actually got our building permit today. So yes, ideally, we want to get started on construction as soon as we can, so that would be ideal.
Yeah, so in a situation like this, it's a little bit unusual because we've got the building permit prior to some of these other planning commission actions. We differentiate it between the actions that they're asking from us are use permits that are necessary prior to operation of the facility related to the tap room and related to the parking on that one. I mean, they're certainly moving forward potentially with some risk in doing improvements prior to those use permits, but essentially the use permits are not required until they occupy the property itself. If it was like a site plan application, that would be different.
Right, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I have a two-part question, one for the applicant and one for city staff. It has to do with the spent grains. For city staff, how are we enforcing the maximum 2-day, or is it one of those that'll go till there's a complaint, or is there a mechanism in place to?
Well, the 2-day is what they had I'm missing the last page on mine, but.
I'm sure it'll be a standard operating procedure part of business, but
In the recommendations, the spent grains must be picked up in a timely manner. The 2
Okay.
days was something that they had just said.
okay,
And it actually isn't as big a deal for staff, because they're gonna be storing them inside.
okay.
A lot of breweries store them outside, and that's where the issues come in.
It's more really for us. We don't want them to be sitting there for very
Yes.
long, yeah.
My other question is where, may not pertain so much to the, maybe more curiosity than anything, where are the spent grains going?
We're hoping to partner with local farms and farmers and have them use that for feed and any other
Fertilizer,
fertilizer,
yeah.
anything else that they can use.
We're actually in the process of securing a contract with one that already reached out to us, and then she probably won't be able to use the full demand, so we'll be reaching out to other
Excellent,
area farmers.
thank you. Commissioners, other discussion or questions for the applicants? If there are none, a motion may be in order.
I'll just make a comment.
Go ahead.
So I had the chance to talk to Nick the other night about the brewery, and I'm really excited about it coming to town. I especially love the theme that you're gonna have running through your product line and tying it to historic Hastings things, events, people, buildings, things like that. I think that's awesome. So,
Thank you.
good job.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Alpine.
I'd like to make a motion to approve special use permit 2017-33 for Spiral Brewery.
We have a motion to approve by Alpine. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Johnson. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors.
Thank you very
And
much.
Director Hinsman, if you can walk us through next steps
Sure.
on this one?
Yeah, next step, this will go to the city council for final action coming up on Monday, the 18th.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we do have one other public hearing tonight, and that is comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning, number 2017-32, Hastings Business and Industrial Park. Director Hinsman.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning Commissioners, we have a little bit of an unusual item here before you tonight. We're looking at a redesignation of about 22 acres in the middle of a field, essentially. You've got the Hastings Industrial Park here. This is Enterprise Avenue, Spiral Boulevard. This is the Water Tower. The Veterans Athletic Complex is over here. What we have to the north of Spiral and east of Enterprise is a very large piece of property that we've had different ideas over what to do with that over the years. One of the things that we've been doing recently with our industrial park is we've been entering into something called shovel-ready certification. What that is it's a marketing mechanism used by the state and used by some of the utility authorities to market the property as being set for development on that. And as we're going through talking to people that would go through the certification process and realtors that are looking for sites for development, we found out a couple of things that we were a little bit new to us. Number one is that the desirability of this park, having the contiguous acreage and the location, was more desirable than we had at first anticipated. We always kind of looked at this area as having maybe some difficulties on it from a transportation standpoint, a locational standpoint. But what we're hearing back from different site selectors is that, no, this is a really good piece for development. The one thing they did say is that with the certification program, it's better to have a 50-acre contiguous chunk of land for marketing development in the future. And so what we're doing tonight is we're attempting to provide that here. What's being shown here in the red is a redesignation of our comprehensive plan and rezoning so that we could create an area that's completely zoned industrial, which would be this area in black here. This area in black would be a contiguous area of 50 net acres. It takes out some of the other setbacks and buffers that we'd have within there. So this is a part of property that's generally north of the trail connection to Glendale Heights over by the water tower. Specifically, we're looking at a comprehensive plan amendment that would change the designation from park to industrial park, and a rezoning that would change it from public institution to industrial park I-1. One of the things historically we looked at on this property, we reviewed this as part of the comprehensive plan on a couple of different occasions. When we had the 2020 comprehensive plan, which was done about 20 years ago in 2000, we had designated this whole area here as being industrial park. As you can see on this property here, the whole area here was designated for future industrial. When we took a look at the plan 10 years ago, our thought at the time was we weren't sure of the industrial demand and business park demand in this northern part, and thought, well, let's redesignate this as park. We don't anticipate a demand, and we weren't looking at this as having the desirability that we're seeing now. And so we had designated at that time as park, which would be consistent with the Veterans Park area to the east. So there's a little bit of history of us looking at this as industrial parking, look at this other ways. We did have a meeting with our Park and Rec director and with the Planning Commission of Council to look at this. They were, the Planning Commission was supportive of this. The Park director, he looked at this, and I think it's something it would be fair to say he could live with. I mean, obviously, having more area here for future park would be most desirable for him, but he understood the situation, and the Planning Committee was supportive of that as well. What this means in the short term is we create this area for marketing. It doesn't mean that we'd be bringing utilities directly into this area. We would look at that on a case-by-case basis. We have utilities that presently exist on Enterprise Avenue to probably about this point with city sewer and water. If the right project came along, we could extend them further up here. So that would be a decision made upon a development in the future. So what we're asking for tonight is to change the comprehensive plan designation and the rezoning for this property. And this is a public hearing. You can start that at this time, or I can stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone comment? Seeing none, go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, commissioners, this is before you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Slayton.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a little bit here.
Okay.
In the future, when Hastings reaches 40,000, 60,000, because it's going to, as the rest of Dakota County has. Won't be in our lifetimes, or mine, or anybody else sitting here, but it will. Where do you see the next cluster of baseball fields
Sure.
if we take this away?
You know, I believe there would still be room for baseball expansion space on this property here, as you can see here, and then the ball fields themselves are down in this area, so it would still leave room for that. Depending on where the city grows, there may be other areas that come up that another regional ball complex could go as well.
In the future, we're looking out there.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. If we've got room to the south, to the west there, west and east, then I don't have a problem with this.
Sure.
But I'm just kind of playing the game here.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm kind of coming at that same concept, and I don't have a good feeling for, what's going to be the demand. Like I said, we met with the Parks Department and whatnot, and I'm torn about taking this out away from potential park space. It's a great setting. We've got the Vets Park there. I mean, it's a great place to expand. It makes sense to put it there. I don't know how much sense and I understand you're trying to set this up so that we can say, look at what we got, marketing kind of an angle. What prevents us from rezoning it if and when that happens?
Oh, upon a project coming forward?
On a project coming forward, and so I'm just being the other devil's advocate. Why do we remove this from parks now?
Sure. The reason why we're asking for it now is it's necessary to be part of the shovel-ready certification for this area. Without this area being in there, we wouldn't be able to have the property certified in that manner, and so we would have less ability to market it. So that's kind of the drive behind the designation.
And what does it take to get certified?
It's a number of different things. There's some surveying on it. There's some phase 1 environmentals, making sure the utilities are up to the site, soil conditions for building construction, those type of things.
Okay.
So right now, there's nobody that's looking at us to say, hey, we want this land.
No, nobody's looking at us in that fashion. It's just that with the different regional partners that we work with that are working with site selectors are looking for large sites like this, and there's not that many of them in this close proximity to the metropolitan area. So it's a bit more desirable than we had originally anticipated on that. In the past, in the last comprehensive plan, we looked at kind of limiting our role in the industrial park by redesignating this as park up here and really making a focus towards other creation of a new industrial park elsewhere. From talking to site selectors and what they think of the property now, we're rethinking the desirability of this area and looking at potential expansion today, thinking we have the land, the infrastructure's in place, it's already an industrial park. If we're able to develop it in such a way, let's do it that way.
Mr. Chair, one more. The talk of the last week here is that Amazon's looking to build somewhere in Minnesota.
Coincidental.
And is this a site that Hastings would put forward in enough acreage?
Yeah, that one, I heard 100 acres for that one altogether, and there's other constraints that they're looking at, and specifically on the transit end of it. I don't think that we would be in the competition. We would have the ability to put forward a site on that.
I'd like to rewind one question there, and perhaps we tap Commissioner Barsa's expertise on this, but I want to make sure I'm understanding this. Could there potentially be or have been people looking for a site, and then to what Commissioner Johnson was saying is we wait until someone comes and then we rezone it. they don't want to put the investment even into that effort without it already being ready. Is that, am I understanding that right? That like they'll pass us by because they don't even want to take the time and effort and energy to look at us because we're not, this site's not ready. Is that?
Sure, I can start
Fair
with
to
that,
say?
Rob, if you feel free to come on in as well. The primary role of a site selector is to eliminate sites from a list. And it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but the more easier a site is to develop, the higher it is competitively on that one. And so through the shovel-ready certification program, they're trying to take out as much of those unknowns as possible. And one of those unknowns, frankly, is the zoning entitlement end of it, because in many places, having a rezoning take place can be a very contentious and an issue that may not have an outcome that's predictable. I'm not sure, Commissioner, if you have anything more to add to that?
No, I think you answered that great, John. I think the one thing I would add to it is these marketing tools help broaden the reach beyond, maybe local or regional developers as well from the private side. So some of these marketing efforts can get into, RFPs that local players aren't even working on. So it's another advantage you can bring to the table.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Alpha.
just out of curiosity, John, has any of the communities around here already benefited from having this shovel-ready type of parcels ready? And if so, what kind of uses were they?
Yeah, it's a good question on that one. As far as shovel-ready certification and what's that's led to, I know it's been used more heavily throughout state Minnesota, and there's been some successes there. In the metropolitan area, I'm not as familiar, and I don't know if Commissioner Barth, if you
I think
recall.
the only that I'm aware of is within Lakeville's, some of their districts, they have some designated for data centers that have larger infrastructure runs that most communities wouldn't have. But I think, like John said, a lot of the shovel-ready sites are in outstate markets that they've established them for marketing positioning.
Great, thank you.
So I too was kind of looking at it from the park perspective. I wasn't so much looking at it from athletic park space, more of leisure type park space. And because quite frankly, if we're going to add more soccer fields, ball diamonds out there, there's gonna be a lot of cost to the city, in my opinion, because right now it's not safe how it is. On a busy day out there, 5-year-olds running everywhere and cars and people, and it's so if we start to add more to that, we start looking at infrastructure of we've got to kind of redesign the way we have our traffic patterns through there. So then I started looking, okay, as a park, what benefit does it have to us? Because it's been said in some of our comp plan meetings and that sort of thing that, the amenities, the ball diamonds, the fields, they're great. There's not really return on investment for them. And I think our Parks and Rec does a really good job with what we have. So then we move to what's the bigger issue is we need to create jobs within Hastings. And so this is a way to start to entice people to come here that can provide those jobs here in town. So then from the leisure recreation perspective, I don't believe it's within the city limits, but you're not very far from the Sand Coulee, which is way underutilized. It's a really neat feature for this area. So from that perspective, I kind of, through my own thought process, became more comfortable with the rezoning of this for my 2 cents in argument's sake. Commissioners, any other discussion on this one? If there's none.
Maybe one additional question, John, based on some of the comments in here, are there any opportunities that DEED or some of the organizations are aware of that are coming up that this would allow us to respond to that we aren't able to now?
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the things that we've been doing more proactively now than we were a year ago with additional staff here, is that we're be able to show people what we have here. We didn't do a good enough job of that in the past. And so this will help even more.
I got one last question. So Rob mentioned data centers. What, you said when we do this, we don't build any additional infrastructure related to this parcel?
Mhm.
Are there any plans the city has to look at infrastructure improvements, like internet access?
On the internet access, I mean, we're working with Dakota County on a fiber project there. Beyond that, I'm not terribly familiar with that.
Okay.
There's no other discussion, a motion would be in order.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Slate.
make a motion for approval of comprehensive plan amendment rezone 2017-32 as submitted by city staff.
We have a motion to recommend approval. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second by Alpop. Any discussion on the motion before us?
I would just make a comment. I just think this is a really nice place, location, to the north and to the east. We've got the Vermilion River is very close here, right? And there are the ravines, and I mean, there's some topography right next door. It looks like there's topography off to the west. And again, I know where we're going with this. But someday too, you know, again, maybe not ball fields, maybe it's the location here is just kind of prime for some sort of park site, not necessarily the ball fields, but recreational space. And so I would like to see, and we have a motion here, and that's fine. I would like to see us maybe handle this a little bit differently, but that's my 2 cents.
Fair enough. The motion before us is to recommend approval. Do we have any other discussion on the motion? We got a second by Alpop. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion prevails. All right, John, next steps on this one.
Next step on this one, we'll take the rezoning portion of the ordinance amendment to order the public hearing on consent agenda on the 18th meeting of September, and then we'll have both actions come forward for final action by council on the 2nd of October.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is other business.
Sure, under other business, I can kind of recap some of the actions we had at City Council at the last meeting last Tuesday night. We had the public hearing to rezone the Kateria Smith Funeral Home at 3075 Vermilion Street. Had that public hearing, and they ultimately approved that. So the rezoning of the property is set, and they have actually submitted site plans on that one. So we're going to be reviewing those internally tomorrow at Development Review Committee, and that might be something coming before the Planning Commission, the site plan application coming up at our next meeting on the 25th. And then we also had an action where we were dealing with a fence that was installed at 209 West 7th Street. It was some contention as for the property owner of whether this was a fence or not. Ultimately, the council affirmed that it was a fence, and there's different actions that Mr. McCoy will have to do to resolve the issue, either to modify the height of it or apply for permits, but it's, so there's more to come on that one as it moves forward. As I mentioned, we've got a meeting scheduled. The next one, ours would be September 25th. I do believe we'll have that site plan application on here for Kateria Smith, so looks like we will be having a meeting on that. And then I just wanted to let the commissioners know, if they did not know already, that Mr. Estenson has submitted his resignation, and he's moving on to greener pastures here. And He'll have, I think you'll be here for the 25th, Adam?
Yes, I will.
So we'll have one more meeting on the 25th. We'll also have elections for the chair position at that time as well. And I'll say more on the 25th, but I always appreciated your insight and your leadership here, and your role will be missed.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, commissioners, any other business?
Just a question, John. Are we going to see a zoning ordinance proposal change because of the fence conversation?
No.
No? Okay.
None proposed at this time.
Okay.
Is that something that came before us?
No.
All right, any other business?
I just have one quick question. I noticed there's a bunch of property that's just gone up for sale going out on the western side. Is that all part of any kind of development plan?
Is that on 55 just by the substation?
No, there's some going out 46, 47 on both sides, and then some going down Sebin. It's by that New Day Realty listed.
Oh, okay. Justin probably has more about that.
Under corn right now.
Because my short-term memory's gone, apparently.
Are you, 47, that area?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just part of an estate, I think, and they just decided to sell it now. They don't- some of it's, a little bit further out than our,
Some of it goes up Sebin too, General
Yeah.
Sebin.
Yeah, I think so. There was about four or five different parcels, some of it north of 46, there's some of it by General Sieben. We've spoken briefly with the realtor on it and shown him what the comprehensive plan and zoning would be on the property, but as far as anything more specific than that, nothing.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
And not property that's presently within the city limits.
Some of it is. There's some areas north of 46 that are currently in between 46 and the Vermilion River that are in the city limits, but I think most of it isn't. It's within the comp plan growth area, but not the city limits presently.
All right, any other business? If not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We have a motion by Slayton. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Johnson. Those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.